When truth is blurred by lies and misinformation, perception becomes reality. What will you perceive your reality to be?
Liberate your fears and walk with me.
Sit down and meditate. Connect with your soul.
Be a monster and then learn how to control it.
You got to be willing to do the work.
So it really goes really deep in terms of words and etymology and what they mean. So this is why it is really hard to really crack the matrix, because there's so many levels and layers to it, Hello and a warm welcome to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. I am your host Todd Cave and this is podcast 15. On this episode, I was a guest on the Reality Czars Podcast, where we talked about human origins, the Anunnaki, spirituality, and the actual ruling families of who rule this planet lock, stock, and barrel. This is a very interesting podcast, and you're going to hear some names of who are the real controllers and movers and shakers of this planet Earth. If you're new to this channel, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share, because that helps us to be recommended in the algorithms. If you would like to support this podcast, please check out our merch store on Amazon with the brand Todd and Me. We've got some cool t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, and sweaters. Link will be in the description of this podcast. And if you're now starting a spiritual journey, you would like to start a spiritual journey, or you're currently on a spiritual journey and you would like some help removing some fears and traumas, please hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 and it will help you to get some magic mushrooms. Enjoy the show and stay tuned, because we have some really amazing guests coming soon.
And we're live. Welcome, everybody. This is the Reality Czars Podcast, and I'm your only host tonight, Nate. I'm honored to have Todd here. Todd, you're a friend of Jahan. Jahan recommended you, and I'm happy to talk to you, brother. So this is your first time on the show. Do you want to tell our audience a little bit about yourself and where they can find you?
Yeah, sure. So I am originally from Barbados. I lived there for half my life. Went to the UK. While I was there, I studied as a civil engineer, and I was a civil engineer for quite a few years. And about 6 years ago, my life changed, and I had life-changing surgery on my foot, and that basically started a series of dominoes to fall in my life, and I basically lost almost everything, almost had a mental breakdown, and then basically one thing led to the next, and now I am an online fitness coach. I help spiritually inclined people burn fat and build muscle, and as you can tell from what I just said, I cover both the mental, the spiritual, and the physical aspect of a human being. And this is why my students get amazing results, because I don't just teach them how to exercise, but I help improve their mindset and give them some really cool stuff to do, like meditations, and teach them about spirituality and connecting back to source, etc. And you can find me on Instagram at Adriano_246, or Todd Cave, TODDCAVE, on Facebook. And those are my social media where you'll find all of my work and all of my thoughts and basically what I do, day in, day out.
Awesome, man. Well, that sounds really interesting, and it's kind of cool to have you and Jahan. You guys are both from the Barbados originally? That's cool, dude. What is it about the Barbados, man? Are you guys, there's something in the water that wakes you guys up? Is it something culturally, or is it just like you two are the only ones on the island?
The island is very small, so we're only 300,000 people. And
wow, that is pretty damn small, man.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the thing is that there are not many people like him and I that actually talk about these things in the detail and with the ability that we have. So what happened is I actually went on the Jason Christoph platform, and he heard me. And he said, hold on a minute, this guy, he sounds like he's from Barbados. But I didn't say it was from Barbados on the podcast. But obviously, a fella Bajan would know, oh, well, he's from Barbados, he's a Bajan. So he
he reached out to Jason Christoph, and he got my details, and then we did a podcast together. We did actually 3 podcasts together, and we just did one on Saturday. We smashed it. Like I tore apart religion, government, the entire system. That anyone that listens to that cannot consciously go about thinking the exact same way they were, because I gave people the receipts and told them where to look. So this is the thing about me. I give people receipts, right? I don't just talk like if it's just from me.
Cool, man. That sounds like fun. Jayhan's a real smart dude, a good guy to have a conversation with. So I'm excited to talk with you too. Where do you want to get started talking tonight?
Well, I would basically start from the oldest records that we have, which are the Sumerian tablets. And the Sumerian tablets are about 5,500 years old. And it talks about a time of about 450,000 years ago. And at the moment, because they're the oldest records, it means then that every other thing that comes after that are more or less copies or derivatives of this information. So when you look at the Sumerian tablets, it tells you about a group of deities that are called the Anunnaki, and they came to this planet, to mine gold and to get resources for their planet, which was called Nibiru, because their planet was dying. And in the Sumerian kings list, there's a line on it that says, and the Anunnaki lowered the kingship from heaven to earth. And basically, heaven just means the sky, right? And in languages that are Latin-based, like Spanish, Portuguese, Latin, Italian, sky and heaven are really the same language, the same word, sorry. But in English, we have 2 different words. So this is why I always tell people that English doesn't really allow you to have a high level of consciousness, because a lot of the meanings and sort of like energy in to communicate was dumbed down and taken out a lot with the invention of the English language.
Dude,
So,
I think that was definitely done on purpose. I think
Absolutely.
Also the English language, and I mean, I think that's why it's also promoted as being like the worldwide language. And also, I feel like it literally puts chains on you sometimes. Like the things that you say, it limits you, and it can also it can trap you. And in like mindsets, and in like if you want to get like real about it, like word magic, it actually can like stop you from doing things. It's pretty fascinating. English is a weird language.
absolutely, because when you look at English, right? So I am fluent in Portuguese and also in Spanish. And there's a word in Portuguese called saudades. Now, saudades, this is almost impossible to translate in English because there's a feeling. So basically, the best translation would be like longing for. It'd be like missing, right? And that word is used like when you miss someone. It's like a melancholy, longing feeling that you have for this person that's not with you. So you see how many words I had to use to describe the feeling behind the word. And this is what English has done to our consciousness. And I do agree. I think it was done on purpose. And you see, when you go back to the records, right, even in the Sumerian tablets, it talked about changing up the languages, because at the time we used to speak one language, because when the Anunnaki came, they taught us their language. But what happened is that when they came here and they started to take out the resources, so let's think about the Anunnaki as like the royal families, the aristocrats, the politicians, the elite, right? And then the Gigi, which were the same beings as them, but they were more the working class. And we, the Goyim, the Gentiles, the worker class, the blue collar, we are like the Ajiji. So we are the ones that do the work and make the system work. Now, the Anunnaki are just like the managers. They're again, like I said, the royal families, the prime ministers, presidents, etc., etc. And they had the Ajiji, which were their people mining gold. Mining gold is very, very hard. So after I think it was 200,000 years, they got pissed off and said, no, we didn't come here to be slaves. We're done. And they almost had a revolution and went to war of the Anunnaki. And we know about this in a document called the Atrahasis, which is part of the Epic of Gilgamesh in those tablets. Now, when they were going to fight and take arms against the Anunnaki, one of the ruling gods, because they describe themselves as gods, and basically my research shows me that they're like a hominid species. They have 2 legs, arms, they walk on the upright, they put on the pants the same way as us, one leg as the next, but just maybe much, much bigger and a lot more advanced scientifically, spiritually, and technologically. And there are 3 main gods in this pantheon: Anu, Enlil, and Enki. So Anu, he is like the chief god, right? And Enki and Enlil are his sons. So Enki, he was the firstborn, but he was born of a concubine. So that means that he was not a rightful heir to the throne. But Enlil, although the secondborn, he was born to Anu's half-sister. So this is where we get these royal families and these elite only marrying amongst this bloodline, because this is where it comes from, right? So there was always a rivalry between Enlil and Enki. And this transferred into like their peoples because they were like gods, so they had like followers. And this is where you see the origins of religions and sects have come from, because it was these 2 brothers basically fighting against one another and their offspring fighting against each other. And we, the humans that they created, which I'll get to in a minute, they used us as pawns to basically fight the wars and to serve them, right? They may never fight amongst themselves, but they will always use us to fight their wars for them. Similar to now, do these prime ministers or presidents go to war? No, they get us to give our blood for their wars for oil, wars for resources, etc. It's the same thing. It was exactly the same thing in these Sumerian tablets. So what happened now is that when the Ajiji went to rebel against the Anunnaki, Enki came up with an idea, and that was to create a being that would be able to carry out tasks that would be just smart enough that they'd be able to take instructions, right? So what they did is that over several, maybe thousands of experiments of mixing their DNA with theirs and the hominid species that had existed on the time on the planet, Homo sapiens sapien, they mixed their DNA with the Homo sapiens sapien species and created us, Homo sapien. In the Sumerian tablets, it talks about clonation, chimeras, gene splitting, all of these things. So we think that we've invented these things. These things have existed for hundreds of thousands of years, right? And when you read these documents and these books and tablets and cylinder scrolls, they tell you about them, right? So what happened is that when they created man, the Adama, because Adam comes from the word Adama. So we are thinking in Bible that, Adam is the first man, but Adama or Adapa in some other translations really just means first man. That's it. And he was a race of beings, right? The first set that they created. And then obviously after many sets of procreation, because what they did is that when they first created Homo sapien, which was us at the time, they were mules. They couldn't procreate, right? No matter how they tried. So what they did is they did more genetic sequencing. And what they did is that they took an egg out of a female that they created. They mixed more of their DNA with that egg. And one of the Anunnaki gods, well, she was a goddess, named her Sag, or called Inanna, Isis. She put the disseminated egg in her womb, or it was placed in her womb, and she carried the child to term for 10 months. And that was the beginning of us. This is why in Genesis...
And was that the Immaculate Conception myth as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is really where Genesis comes from. It means Isis, the generations of Isis, because Isis is really Anana, and Anana is Ninhursag. So what these Anunnaki gods have done, or beings, is that they've changed their names several times. So for the Chaldeans, there was one name. For the Hindus, there were another name. For the Jews, is another name, because they created everything, right? So and even like in Egyptian pantheon, the Greek pantheon, these are the same beings behind the scenes running things, but they were just known as different names. So that's why like you would hear me use many different names, but they're really the same beings, right? So when they created Adam, the first man, and basically they also created the female, because there were 7 goddesses that had bore males and 7 goddesses that bore females. So what they did is that they took them and used them to procreate for the species in order to mine the gold and to be their servants, right? And Eden, Edin, was also the place. It was basically like a open laboratory in Mesopotamia. So a lot of people would say, oh, well, the cradle of civilization comes from Africa. That's not correct. According to these tablets, which are the oldest on the planet, the cradle of civilization was in Eridu, which is in modern-day Iraq and Lebanon and the whole Middle Eastern area. This is why the Middle East area has been fought off for hundreds and thousands of years, right? Because this is where all the high knowledge, all the high information, all started, right? So after they created us and we started to get a little bit of common sense and understand, what happened is they realized that we had the potential to actually surpass them, because we're both made of flesh and spirit. Because the Atrahasis tells you that they sacrificed one of their own, a Gigi called Elalu, and they did a magical incantation, and they basically transferred his spirit and consciousness into the Frankenstein body that they had created. This has also been confirmed by other books like the Nag Hammadi text, and it talks about that the Father, Mother, God allowed them to create us, but he told them that they need to breathe the spirit of life into the body, because the body was like a Frankenstein. It wasn't alive. It was mute. It had no consciousness. So what happened then is that when they created us, it meant then that they had control over us. But because we were starting to show signs of development, they did a lot of things to counter our development. Things that they did were like, they capped our telomeres, and telomeres are responsible for cell regeneration. This is why our lifespan is capped at 120 years. This is actually confirmed in science, where they say that our telomeres have been capped about 200,000 years, 200 to 250,000 years ago, which again is inside of these tablets, right? They also talks about merging chromosome 2 together, because chromosome 2 was a pair and is also being fused together. So again, this is another genetic modification they did to us in order to really slow down our advance as a species of consciousness and stuff like that. And then they also install something into us called a worship gene. And this is why many humans have this predisposed thing to like worship authority, government.
Every single person does, even if you don't think you do. Because you end up, even if you're not worshiping like a god, you start worshiping science, or you start worshiping that's where you have like those atheists that just like bow down to whatever like Fauci has to say, because then that becomes their god. Yeah. Every single person puts something. Yeah. Like I completely agree with you. Like human beings were created to worship. We have that in us. It's fascinating. Yeah.
Yes. And this is why, because the Anunnaki know this, and they are basically, from my research, they are the ones that own this planet lock, stock, and barrel through their bloodlines, which are the heads of state, royal families, aristocrats, etc.
And probably bigger people than them, like people that we don't get to see their face and things like that. Yeah.
But I can call names of people that basically from what I have researched, there seem to be 3 levels of 13 families that control this planet.
Let's talk about that, man. That's fascinating. People always say that. And then, I'm just curious. Let's name names if you got them.
So the people that are like at the 3rd level would be like the prime ministers, presidents, heads of state, and stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, they're not on top.
No, the 2nd level would be like the kingdom in England, the queen, the king now, that royal family. They're like in the number 2 level. You have like the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Collins family, all those other families, right? Now, then on top of that, you have 13 other families. Off my top of my head, I can remember 5, because in these 13 families, there are only 5 families that are the most active, and they're the Orsini family, the Medici, the Aldobrandini, the Breckspear, and the Samagoli family. And this is why, if you look to see who's the Grey Pope is Pepe Orsini, and he is the most powerful human on Earth. Behind him is where the Anunnaki sit, it appears, and then behind the Anunnaki seems to be the negative energy that they worship, right? So there's even layers to them, right? Because there seems to be an entity that controls this planet, right? And this is why scripture says that when you see who it really is, you'll be like, him that's controlling it? Basically, the movie The Wizard of Oz is a direct representation of what it really looks like, because you saw it was just some old man behind a curtain that was just pulling strings. And that's basically what we have today.
That's fascinating, man. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you is where were and are the Anunnaki represented in our world today? And you've kind of, I guess, said that. So do you think that, that is fascinating as fuck, man, because this was years ago. There was some like middle school girl. She like did a bunch of research, and it was like every single president that the United States has ever had, except for one, have all been relatives. They've all been, you can trace back their bloodlines and things like that. And it's so funny. I mean, I honestly don't know if Trump is related genetically, but he probably is. I just don't know where the connection is. But it's funny. It's like people didn't know that like Barack Obama and George W. Bush were cousins. Like it's so funny, man. Yeah, it's so weird. And then another example is like the Queen and her husband, or both now deceased, they were cousins, and now Harry and Meghan Markle, they're also cousins. And
really,
yes, yeah, look that up. Yeah, he didn't just move to, he didn't just come here and find some B-list celebrity, African-American girl and like, I'm going to marry you. No, she's royal bloodline, man. Yeah, they're cousins. It's so interesting, man.
You see, it just confirms when I say all the time that everything is controlled in this matrix, everything, right? And we do live in a matrix, right? And this matrix is basically run by dualities and trinities. So in the beginning, remember I said that there were 3 gods, right? Anu, Enki, and Enlil. So that trinity is the representation of the trinity that we have in many other different religions. So like in Christianity, they talk about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Now, that is a representative of the true makeup of what we are, because like Thoth says that he was the Son of Man. Then you have Christ that said he was the Son of Man. He also said that we humans, all of us, you and I, are the sons of man. And what that means then is that the Father, Mother, God created itself from nothing, because it didn't exist and it exists at the same time. This is why, in order to understand it, you have to like push past what they tell you, because where the end is the beginning, where the beginning is the end. You can't have a chicken without an egg, and you can't have an egg without a chicken. But the chicken and the egg existed at the same time, which is why you could have a chicken and an egg, right? Is he saying with us, right? This is why Christ said that he was created in the beginning. Now, you will notice that I said the word Christ and not Jesus, because Jesus, that really just means Hail Zeus, which is really Enlil, which is another form of worshiping these gods through the back door without us even knowing. So religion is just a control system, because the word religion comes from the Latin word religare, which means to hold or to bind. And what religion does is that it holds and binds the minds of its followers, which is why I say there are three religions on earth: the religion of money, the religion of government, and the religion of as an organized religion. And this is why when you try to communicate any points that goes against either of these narratives, they all have the exact same behavior, because they're all zealots, they're fanatics, because all religious people, all governmental people, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, doesn't matter, right? They all are very, they push back like very, very fanatically on their views and beliefs. It's the same thing if you try to talk to a Muslim and tell them Islam is fake, same thing. If you try to talk to Jehovah's Witness, push back, the same. If you try to talk to a Christian, the same. It's all a behavior, because these Anunnaki gods came here, put a worship gene in us, created these forms of religion. And I use religion broadly because when you look at the definition of religion, it is basically a cult, because a cult is focused on a leader with its members displaying excessive, zealous, unquestioning commitment. A cult, the members are preoccupied with bringing in new members. The group is preoccupied with making money. Questioning, doubting, or dissent are discouraged or even punished, and the initiates need to perform a ritual to become a member. So this is a cult. When you look at a religion, the religion is focused on a leader with its members displaying excessively zealous behaviors, unquestioning commitment. They send out missionaries to convert the unsaved. There are always collection bowls around, be either during or at the end of the gathering, to collect money. Questioning, doubting, and expressing a doubt, going against the rules is not tolerated and even punished. Look at what happens to truth tellers now when they go against the narrative. They get crushed. And new converts to this religion always undertake some sort of a ritual to confirm membership. So you see, a religion and a cult are the exact same thing, right? So we live in a world of many different cults, and this is all by design, because the Anunnaki instilled these things through their bloodlines, because this is why these elite think is their divine right to rule, because they know that they have come from this ancestry, right? Where their ancestors came from another planet, set up this system, and they just says, well, Johnny, well, it's your divine right to rule because this is our bloodline, and they're the goyim, the little whatever, they're there to serve you. And they get indoctrinated from birth, which when you think about it, you kind of have to like feel a bit sorry for them sometimes, because they actually don't really know that that's not true. So because they're just being indoctrinated, just like we've been indoctrinated from television, the media, or organized religion, or society to talk like this, do this and do that, you know? So it's all by design, right? So this is why, like, I always tell people that if you really want to understand the present, you need to study the past, because the past directly connects to the present. And when you look at the world that we live in, you realize that it doesn't matter what government changes, the agenda seems to go on. Then you look at religion, people's lives don't get better when they are, very, very religious. In fact, their lives get worse, right? There's no happiness, there's no love, there's no compassion, there's no kindness. Or in a religion like Islam, is conditional love and kindness, because Islam is the only religion on earth that in their scripture, it says that it's free to join the cult, but if you want to leave the cult, the penalty is death, because Muhammad says, kill those who change their religion, i.e. who leave. He says throw them off of a building, you know. So, you know what I mean? Again, that goes against the narrative. Dissent is punished, and you pay with your life, you know. So this is why, like, I really mix the like geopolitics, spirituality, consciousness, and then link it back to the Sumerians and their tablets and stuff, because they're all connected. You can't look at one or the other. They're always connected. And when you look at the Genesis story, even that has holes in the narrative, because they tell us that God is omnipresent, omnipotent, all-knowing. Now, it says in Genesis that when God was walking in the Garden of Eden, he was looking for Adam. Let me rephrase that. Let me say it again. When God was walking in the Garden of Eden. So, brother, do you think that God is a person? Like, can God walk? And
that's an interesting question, and it could be answered by different people differently. I mean, I grew up very religious and Christian, and the answer that was given to me is that God already knew that Adam had done it, and he already knew that Adam was going to do it, and he was just kind of letting himself incriminate himself. Like, he was like, well, where are you, Adam? What are you guys doing? Like, so that was what I heard. But as far as like God being able to walk, I don't know. I think that he can do anything that he wants. So I think he could definitely come down here in person. And that's a whole interesting idea too, the Garden of Eden, that was at a time, maybe it's not even necessarily a physical place. It was almost a time where God and man interacted face to face. That's a fascinating concept, and I'm not sure. But if you talk to someone like the Gnostics, they describe like, God, as a kind of a serpent with 4 legs, a lion's head, and some wings, which is fascinating. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on any of that?
well, now to go back to what I had said, this actual scripture says God was walking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm not telling you that, they're lying by omission, right? I even showed it to my mother because I was raised a Christian, and I asked her as an adult, but how can God walk? She said, I never thought of that, because they don't teach you how to think, right? Religion, again, it holds and binds. So if God was walking, and they tell us God is spirit, right? God is like invisible, right? According to
it also says that we were built in his image. So it would almost say that he has 2 legs and 2 arms.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which is why when you read the Sumerian tablets, it tells you that the gods were Enlil, Enki, and Anu. And Enki was representation of the serpent, because the serpent is the giver of consciousness. And what happened is that Enki taught man that they were actually more superior than us, which is why it says in the Bible that the fallen angels were supposed to worship and submit to Adam, and they refused. Even in Islam, it says that as well. But what it was, when you read the Gnostic Gospels, you get a bit more information on that, and that because when they breathed the life into Adam, then Adam became a sentient being. They realized that he had the potential to be greater than them. So remember what I said, everything comes from these Sumerian tablets, right? And if at the time Enlil, who's really Yahweh, who's really Jehovah, who's really El Shaddai, and other names, he was walking in the garden looking for Adam, right? Because what happened is that when Enlil was walking, because Enlil means Lord of Air, because the word En stands for Lord, and Lil is air, Lord of air, Lord of command. And Enki is Lord of earth, because Ki is earth. So Enki was Lord of earth, but Enlil was Lord of command. So he was Lord of the air. So he was, you see, this is where all the issues came from, because Enki, being the firstborn, really felt that he should be the ruler. But because the rules are that you need to be the son of the half-sister, it was really Enlil, but Enlil was the younger one, and Enlil was the warlord, while Enki, he was the master geneticist and scientist, right? He wasn't so much aimed for so much war, but he was more like the creator god, right? Because he was into science, technology, etc. So what happened really is that when Enki gave us consciousness, this is where the serpent in the Garden of Eden story comes from, and they used the serpent to represent Enki, and they told us that he was the devil. So what you will see is that when you compare these tablets to the biblical texts, the Sumerian tablets give a lot more information and fill in the gaps, right? Because the Sumerian tablets describe Eden as being an open laboratory, and the Adams, which were the first men, they had like times when they had to go and have sex with the girls because they were trying to create a race of people to do work. So the same way how in modern day slavery that started about 500-600 years ago, where they used to have the slaves having to go and have sex. Like they used to call us cattle actually, to have sex at certain times because they wanted to create.
You recording?
Other.
Sorry, my son son came in for a second.
That's fine.
Yeah.
And they show you that it was an open laboratory, right? They had a lot of experiments. So this is why it said that we were made in God's image, which is both true and is also false. Because the God that is in all of these religious texts are extraterrestrial Anunnaki gods, right? With a small g, The way the Gnostics describe them, they could actually even be interdimensional beings. We don't know. But what we do know is that the word Anunnaki means those from heaven to earth came. That's the word that's used in the Sumerian tablets, and that's what it means. So basically, those that are from the sky out to this planet came to earth, you know what I mean? It means they're Anunnaki. So like if we were to go to Mars or Jupiter and there were beings there, and they would say, hey man, where you from? You would say, well, I'm an earthling, right? I wouldn't say that I'm from Barbados because, well, what is Barbados in the grand scheme of things? Like, I'm from Earth, right? I'm an earthling. That's exactly the same way the Anunnaki were described. So they were from different galaxies, different planets. Some were from the Orion planet, some were from the Pleiades, some were from Sirius, some were from Aldebaran. You know what I mean? There were so many different planets that the Anunnaki came from. So this is why we have different color skin, because there were different actual races from different planets,
Interesting. So this is where I find this these ideas the most challenging, because like I'm sort of in the camp like where I don't know if you've heard the guys that say space is fake and gay. Are you familiar with what that? And so basically, it's like I actually do believe in like the firmament. And I don't necessarily think that we can get out of this shell. Like I do believe in sort of that Gnostic idea that this is kind of like a little, like we have I have the book right here from David Icke, The Trap, right here, that we're kind of like in a fishbowl that we can't get out of. And so I have a hard time imagining that there are aliens like from Pleiades and all kinds of like Nibiru and things like that. But something that you said was something that where I do definitely believe in is interdimensionality. So like where these things are coming from, I might say like, what is Nibiru? Is Nibiru like a dimension right next to ours and they destroyed it and so they came over here? I don't know. It's one of those, and I'm not like completely closed to the idea. That is like my bias, that I have a hard time with the concept of like traveling to like a different planet. I don't know. But I'm just throwing that out there. That's it's hard for me, but I'm not saying that it's impossible.
Well, when you start to look at, when you dive down into like quantum physics and you delve into a lot of these ancient tablets, I think it is possible that we can live in a fishbowl. However, we do know that we have ancient people like the Hopi, the Dogon tribe in Mali, and we have the Aborigine in Australia And these three tribes say the exact same thing, that their ancestors, their gods, came from, in the Dogon's specific instance, the Dogon described the Sirius star system. And they said that they came from there. And
Yeah.
they said their god was a serpent, right? The Hopi say that the ant people, Ant Anunnaki, took them under earth to save them from the cataclysm. The Aborigines in Australia say that they were seeded, I think from memory, from the Palladians, right? So while Earth could be like a basin, you know what I mean, like pretty firm and stuff, what when you read like the Emerald Tablets of Thoth and other documents, there seem to be portals that exist that these entities knew of. So it is possible, according to these ancient tablets, to go through portals to cut space travel to other planets down to like that, right? Because they work on like Merkaba technology. They also work on toroidal energy, and what it is that because now you have technology that can manipulate like reality in that respect, it means that these entities can do weird things. Even think of it, the Bermuda Triangle. While we don't have 100% concrete proof, it appears to be a portal because whatever goes in doesn't come back, you know. And there are other portals on Earth, like from memory in Peru. There's this this gate, which is like a stargate that the ancients used to describe it as, and it looks like a bit of a pillar, like a frame, like a door frame that made out of like stone, you know, very very hard stone. I think from memory, granite. And the elders used to say that was a portal to go in and out of dimensions. So my point is that in all of these different tribes and people that have oral traditions, they talk about the exact same thing. So I don't dismiss that Earth could be like that, but I don't say that it is or it isn't, right? I am open, but what I'm saying is that I think that there's a lot more that we really know and understand. So I would say that I think it's possible that we can time travel, because we know that basically when you take atoms and you take them and you split them and you put one in one side of the planet and one on the other side of the planet, whatever you do to that atom happens to the other atom simultaneously, which is why it just confirms energy and quantum physics, right? Confirms that these things are how the universe seems to be made up of, right? So I think that, you know, we shouldn't close our minds to some of these theories. Some of them may sound fanciful. I think it's just because our perception is very limited at the moment that our level of consciousness isn't really able to perceive, because consciousness is light, it's energy. Yeah, once the consciousness rises, you can see different spectrums of light, because we can only see 7 colors of light, which are the same colors that are in the chakra system, right? Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, and pink. Those are the only colors that we can see. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of colors that are in between there and above or below that we just can't see, right? So I think that there's much that we don't really know, you know?
Yeah, I agree, man. And here's the thing, is that even if that's something I think, I never say that I know something, because how the fuck does any of us know these things, you know? So that's the thing. It's like, I like exploring these different ideas, and you could be 100% right. And I actually have heard that the same thing actually from a gentleman, pretty smart dude. He was talking about like, well, we do sort of live in a fishbowl, but there are these little access points, and you know, and maybe that's contradictory to what I was saying before. Dude, I really want to believe in Stargates. That's one of my favorite shows. I love that the concept of the Stargates. So yeah, I do sort of believe in that. I don't know where the hell they go though. That's yeah.
I think it's very possible, because when you read the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, and you know, Thoth is actually, his original name was Ningashida, and he is Enki's son. And he is represented as, well, in the Egyptian pantheon, as the god of wisdom, god of agriculture as well, I think, from memory. Now, in the Greek pantheon, he is represented as Hermes Trismegistus, and there's a book called the Ancient Knowledge of the Tree of Life by John Vallon Melchizedek. He channeled Thoth, and he says that Thoth was actually Buddha as well, right? So we know that this consciousness, Thoth, the Atlantean, he said, I, Thoth, the Atlantean, great builder of the pyramids in the land of Cam. Cam is Egypt, because it was called Cam. This is where the word chemistry comes from. Alchemy, alchemic, right? Algebra, all come from that area because it was Thoth. And he basically took it among himself to help raise the consciousness of man. Now, he and Marduk, which is his brother, which is Enki's son, had a bit of a beef, and Marduk expelled him from Egypt. And at the time, Marduk's name was Amun-Ra, right? So this is where the word amen, Amun, amen. So every time you say amen, you're actually venerating Marduk, right? So these guys have, like I said, have manipulated our vocabulary, our thoughts, that we worship them all of the time without even knowing. So anyway,
have you watched the show Stargate SG-1? It just reminds me so much of this stuff, man. There's so much, they put so much stuff in like popular movies and there's so much like disclosure. It blows my mind, dude. Yeah.
This is the thing. They tell us the truth in the movies and they teach us the lies in the public indoctrination camps, aka the schools. Yeah. Right?
Dude, it fucked me up the first time I realized me saying amen was saying amen from amen. Yeah, I was like, what the fuck? I was like,
dude, this thing goes way deeper than that.
Yeah.
Even like the Muslims, their meat is called, or the word for permitted is called halal, H-A-L-A-L. Now, in Babylon, the pronunciation and the spelling is the same. Sorry, the pronunciation is halal, but it's spelled Hellel, H-E-L-E-L. Hellel was the word they used for Satan, which at that time was Enlil. You know? So even the Muslims, when they are ritually slaughtering their meat in the name of their God Allah, is actually a blood sacrifice to Satan, Enlil. And for your listeners, the word Satan really just means adversary. So Satan, and Ki could have been Satan at a time, and Lil's a Satan, Marduk a Satan, Nanarsin. And Nanarsin is actually the god of the Muslims because he was the chief god of Ur, and that cult of the moon god went to Arabia, which is another story as well. But when Thoth was expelled from Egypt by Marduk Amun-Ra, he took his high priests who were black and he took them to Mesoamerica and came here to Mexico, the Olmecs, right? So the original consciousness givers here in Mesoamerica were black African high priests who were the disciples or the students of Thoth because they were initiated into the mystery schools. And in Teotihuacan in the 1920s, they discovered the emerald tablets of Thoth. Now think about it. What would Thoth be doing in Teotihuacan? And he was known as Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan, right? He was also known as Viracocha, for the Inca. And we know this because of the symbol, the plumed serpent. This is why I said early in our talk that the serpent is a representation of consciousness. Now, in the East, you have the dragon. That was also a derivative of the plumed serpent, because this is why the East have other high levels of information that the West doesn't embrace. But basically, they've used polarity to push like the two sides apart instead of coming together and putting all the information together, because some Western philosophy and Eastern philosophy, if they merge, we unlock a lot of keys. But because there's polarity, we push against each other, so it keeps us separated. This is why Scripture says, a house divided amongst itself shall surely fall.
Well, think about this, man. I think about this sometimes too. Just when they talk about the Tower of Babel, that was when the entire world was working together. There was one culture, one language, one idea, one plan, one mission. And it even says is that, like, if they all work together, God said they could overthrow me,
Now,
which
think
I
about
find
it.
so fascinating.
Fascinating. Which is, again, if God is a loving God, he would want to see his offspring become greater than him, because there's no jealousy. It'd be like a proud dad watching his only son just grow and flourish. But the God of the Bible is a jealous God. And because he was a jealous God, he decided, let us confuse man, right? And at that time, Marduk was the god in Babylon, because he was also known as Moloch, Baal. Now, this is why you get the word Bible, by bull, by Baal, by Bel, Bible. So Marduk was the chief instigator of the Bible that we have today. This is why they took out many, many books. And the Bible is really a combination of, like, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Mahabharata, the Rig Veda, a bit of the Bhagavad Gita, you know what I mean, the Atrahasis, Enuma Elish. It's just and I think, was it the Upanishads, I think, because they're like the representative of the Psalms or the Proverbs, one of those. You know what I mean? It's a combination of many different books together, right? And this is why it is a little bit sometimes disjointed, and it would jump from one place to the next, and the narrative changes, and God seems to be schizophrenic. One day he's telling us he loves us, the next minute he's punishing us. You know what I mean? So it is a schizophrenic God in the Bible and the Quran and the Torah, but basically it's by design, because these gods, the Anunnaki, just want to get us to serve them and to worship them. And as I was saying, in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, he talks about leaving his body in status and traveling to other realms, other dimensions, going through the halls of Amenti. And he said that he saw beings that were greater than him creating other worlds, other consciousnesses. He said it was just like they were just imagining, and it was things were being created in real time like that, right? Now, I suspect, no, I don't have any proof on this, but from reading all these, the Emerald Tablets, I think that the pyramids may have been imagined into place, because it is very perfect. When you look at the edges and how the blocks fit together, where there's no space and no gap. We've had earthquakes and they're still standing. Well, if he's talking about beings creating other consciousness from thoughts and creating from the ether with their minds, who says that he couldn't have done that? Like I said, I don't have any evidence or any proof. I'm just saying, like, what if, right?
Yeah.
Now, we do know that thoughts are things. We do know that if your thoughts are negative, you will have a negative outcome. And we know that if your thoughts are positive, once you take action, eventually you will have a positive result. So if everything is based on thoughts, and in the Kybalion, which was written by 3 initiates, which was from Hermes Trismegistus, Thoth, Buddha, Quetzalcoatl, and he says the all is mind and the universe is mental, right? It means then that everything starts with the thought. The thought is the thing that createth everything. Because think about it, your thoughts create your beliefs. Your beliefs create your reality. So if the subconscious mind is responsible for 90 to 95% of all your actions, your reactions, your beliefs, and your interactions in this human experience, who says that we can't manifest things from our mind?
Yeah, I think that there's a hell of a lot more possibility than we give things credit for. I think that humans in general, I think that it's totally I don't know, man. It's one of those hard things to really wrap our minds around, but I totally think that at one time we were telepathic. I think at one time we could do things closer, something to like telekinesis and things like that. I think that we are probably more of a psychic being, more of a spiritual psychic being than we give ourselves credit for. I feel like possibly, I don't know if it's been bred out of us. Like maybe some of those traits have been slowly just like dissolving a little bit. And maybe that's why those elite bloodlines, they keep their blood pure in a way, and where they're very particular with who they marry and who they interbreed with. That's a possibility. But I also think that they just dumb us down. I think they indoctrinate the hell out of us. I think they do things like fluoridate our water. I think they do, things like that to just like keep us stupid, keep us ignorant, and then try to keep us like dumb. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm going to give your listeners a really good book to read that blew my mind. It is called The Life and Teaching of the Masters of the Far East. Now, this book was collated between 1890 and 1920 by a group of Western scientists. The scientists were just recording what they saw and observed. And they went to the Far East, Tibet, the Himalayas, etc. And they met ascended masters. And these ascended masters literally could heal people, just like Christ. They could walk on water, just like Christ. And they could teleport as well. And they actually like wrote down in the notes that these guys were teleporting. And there's some really, really, interesting stories in there. One of them was like when they met up with the masters, and the masters were showing them like their quarters. When they first opened the door, the room was pitch black. And as the master was walking, the light gradually increased. And outside was very cold. And as it got further and further in the room, the temperature became more and more perfect. Not too hot, not too cold, just perfect. Then when they went to dinner, the same kind of thing happened. But this time, when they went to the room was empty. And then like that, in a blink of an eye, a table appeared. Like that. Table, plates, forks. Then like that, like an orchestra that was like invisible, just started to play. And the master and the scientists recorded that the music was like with instruments that they've never heard in their life. And the food that they ate just appeared. And when they ate it, it just like gave them a feeling that they've never had in their life. And as soon as they finished, put the knife and the fork on the table, on the plate when they finished, boom, disappeared. Boom, dessert appeared. Like this book is levels, right? And these are mainstream Western scientists that recorded just what they saw. There was this, sorry?
Oh, I just had a question for you. I was going to ask you, Todd,
Yeah.
Do you think there are ascended masters now that can still do these things today?
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
cool. That's cool. And where are they hiding, man? Are they being hidden away? Are they hiding themselves? Sometimes I think I was just talking to somebody the other night. We were talking about who the heck was I talking to? I have too many conversations with people. But something like Shangri-La is supposed to be still hidden away, and maybe somewhere in the Himalayas, and that could be behind, a Stargate somewhere, I don't know.
Well, according to that book, the masters said that the reason why they hide themselves. It basically is akin to the reason why Christ left the earth plane. And they said it's because human beings become lazy and they don't want to do work for themselves. So what it is now is that the way Christ said it, Christ says, greater things shall ye do. So if Christ, the word Christ just means the anointed one, right? The illuminated one, right? It's a title, it's a spiritual office, right? And so all of these masters are the Christ because there are more than one Christ, because I become Christ, you become Christ, everyone becomes Christ, because it's a level of consciousness, right? What happens, what they said is that because the people within the village or the town would keep coming to them for healing or help me with this, help me with that. What happened is that, don't forget, we've got this worship gene inside of us, right? So we become like worshiping of these people, and we become reliant on them to provide for us. So we become lazy. We don't want to do the work on ourselves. We don't want to pick up our own cross and carry it. Like Christ says, pick up your own cross and follow me. What does that mean? Well, you need to die to this world. You need to die to all the physical things, all the things that you're attached to. You need to give them up, right? Even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, because Krishna talks about Krishna consciousness, and the word Krishna means Christ because it is Sanskrit for Christ, right? Because the Greek word was Christos, the Latin was Christ, and the Sanskrit, Krishna, the exact same consciousness. So anyway, Krishna says that you need to be able to look at a lump of gold the exact same way you look at it as a normal rock. So that means the same you can throw away a rock, you can throw away a lump of gold and have zero attachment to it. This is how you become the Christ, because you become detached from things in this physical realm. So you become perfected in your thoughts and feelings, right? Because thoughts only become real when they are clothed in feelings. So if you have, this is what Christ says, you need to take control, you need to take captive of every thought. So if your thoughts can become reality through your feelings, and you take captive of your thoughts, it means you can stop those thoughts from manifesting by cutting the emotional connection, feelings, to that thought, so you become detached from it. So then when you do that, you become the illuminated being, like the Buddha, that keeps regenerating itself, right? So
that's a really fascinating concept. That's really cool. I want that to be true. What do you think about, what are your thoughts on, so there is a positive way to manifest these, I guess, probably in like inherent powers that we have, like these powers that are possible that we can channel, we can use. Do you think that there's a dark, like sometimes I think about like the left hand path, things like that, like some of these dark arts occultists, they seem to have powers too. Is there a dark way to manifest these powers? Is there like, because, you know, in a lot of ways they say there's like an equal and opposite, you know, action, reaction, as above, so below sort of thing. Are there like, I don't know. You think like Hillary Clinton can do some of these crazy things? I don't know. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Todd.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Basically, the same way that
the Antichrist consciousness.
Yes, basically, right? The same way you can use this power for good, you can use this power for negative reasons, right? And this is why Thoth,
it's like the Jedi and the Sith.
Yes, yeah. Because basically, this is why in the beginning you had to be initiated into the mysteries, because the mystery schools that Thoth set up were what you would call the beginning stages of Freemasonry. But what happened is that Freemasonry got co-opted and corrupted, right? Just like religion. You know, when Christ came here for the first 300 years, people were, because Christ, when he came, he called it the way, right? So it's just the way, right, to enlightenment. So his followers for the first 300 years used to call themselves followers of the way. But what happened is when the religion became the state religion of the Romans, and then they became Roman Catholics through Constantine, then all the pagan rituals and stuff came in, because like Christmas really originally was a festival called Saturnalia, which was in the Roman Empire, and that would be like just heavy drinking, heavy sex and orgies and just killing, murder, just whatever, anything went.
Well, it sounded pretty good until the end there.
You know what I mean? That was a pagan festival, right? Saturnalia, which comes from Saturn worship, because Saturn, I think they call Saturn the black sun, right? So there seems to be some sort of like energy coming out of Saturn, which seems to be transferred like to the moon, because the moon seems to be the one that is transferring the consciousness and creating a false matrix here. From what I have researched, Saturn seems to be the origin, at least for now, and that energy is beamed to the moon, and the moon is creating like a false image on the earth, which is creating this reality. Because we know the moon is hollow, and these ancient tablets are saying that it seems to be either a Death Star or it's an abandoned war planet, right? And they say war planet because these warships.
You think that was Nibiru that they fucked up?
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, it's just a husk up there. It's like a skeleton.
Yeah. What is it? Because we know that when they drop stuff on the moon, they say it sounds very hollow, right? So to answer your question, I do think that this power can be usurped for not so good reasons, for very malevolent reasons, yes. And this is why when Thoth set it up, you had to be initiated into the mysteries. Because think about it, you can take a knife, and this knife can be used to defend your family, or a gun for that matter, any weapon. You know, you can take any weapon and you can defend your family from an intruder. You can take that same weapon and go and kill a bunch of people. Now, is the weapon good or bad? The weapon is really neutral, but the person behind the weapon is good or bad. So the information or the power is neither good or bad, but is the person manipulating the power, which can determine if it's a positive outcome or a negative outcome, right?
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I was just curious about that. That is interesting. And Saturn is a whole other conversation. We should talk about Saturn. Saturn is an interesting one, man. I've definitely heard the different theories that like Saturn was like the eminent celestial like thing that we had. Like it was the biggest light in the sky for a while, because it doesn't make sense for most people, right? Like as we think about it now, because if you look at Saturn, it doesn't fucking look any different than a star. It's maybe a little bit bigger, kind of, you know what I mean? Like, how the fuck did anyone know that was any different than a different star? And they put like so much emphasis and focus, like the ancient world, you know what I mean? They super hyper focus on Saturn. Saturn's so important. And so like there's this theory, and I never remember people's names, but there's very, very big, folks that have thought about that Saturn actually was like a second sun to us, and it was much closer, and it was actually like the biggest thing in the sky, as far as like it was bigger than the sun. And then there was like some crazy cataclysm thing that happened, and so like maybe even like that was like a time of alchemy, that was a time of like magical powers, Atlantis, things like that. Something, whatever was Saturn like was like giving us energy in a way that like maybe that's like, kind of Tesla-y, kind of like free weird power, like that sort of things. Like, I don't know. And then something happened celestially and it shot Saturn away. Cause it even says that like Saturn, like the god Saturn, right, was like imprisoned, and I don't know. That's just a fascinating conversation, but Saturn is and so like a lot of like, they talk about the mystery schools and them worshiping the sun, right? that actually, like, this is modern interpretation of us saying like what we thought their sun worship was, but they're actually, it's all Saturn worship, because that was the big sun. And because a lot of it, because people argue, are they talking about Saturn or are they talking about the sun? Like, you know, so many of those cults. I don't know. That's all fascinating. What are your thoughts on that?
It does appear that Saturn could have been a sun at one point in time. And this is why our ancients worshiped the sun. And this is why it was basically solar cult worship at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had, you see, the thing is that these Anunnaki gods, what it looks like they've done is that they've taken natural occurring cataclysms and put their names onto the planets with the outcomes to immortalize themselves, right? So that way now we think of them as gods with a small g, right? Now, what we do know is that Akhenaten in the Egyptian time, he is the equivalent of Moses. And Atun was the sun god that they worship, which seems to have some links with Saturn because it was a solar cult, right? And basically this was where how like they tried to bring in monotheism in Egypt because they had a pantheon. And Akhenaten, he introduced monotheism, which was worshiping the sun, which we do think was maybe Saturn at the time, to venerate, because this is why you have like the sun in Christianity. No, it's not the S-O-N, it was really the S-U-N, right? And because of English, they flipped it on us, and just with a change of a letter, make us thinking that it was the son of God that we were supposed to worship, which was Jesus, right? But the thing is, Jesus really just means Hail Zeus, right? So it's like, you know what I mean? They've put like their names in strategic areas to make us worship them. But I do think it is possible, and according to what I've researched, Saturn could have been a sun at the time, just like Venus. Venus could have been a sun as well, because that's where the word Lucifer comes from. The word Lucifer is not really the representation of the devil. And when you look at the ancient texts, the word in Greek, because don't forget the Bible was written in Greek first, it was called phosphorus. And phosphorus was a representation of Venus. And Venus was the star of the morning star. Basically, that could have been a sun as well, because up to today, Venus is the brightest star in the sky, right? Because in the Sumerian tablets, it says that Venus did a flyby, right? So if Venus did a flyby, then it could have shifted maybe the Earth polarity. It could have had a different set of consciousness there. It could be the sun, so people were worshiping it. And then when Venus left, maybe Saturn was a sun at the time, and we end up worshiping. And then what they did is that they put their names on these planets, right? Because this is why, like, some of the gods, like you have Marduk, he's connected to like you have like Jupiter is connected into Enlil, right? You have Kingu, he was Tiamat's satellite, you know. So they have like all these different, like, you know, Anshar was Saturn. Anshar was one of the gods in the Anunnaki like pantheon, like the story for like Anu, you know. Lahmu was Mars, right? So you have like a lot of these, like in these Anunnaki pantheon bloodline story, where they seem to have like connected their names to like gods. But like even Kronos was attached to in the Greek pantheon as well. He was really Enlil, you know. We know that Zeus,
Kronos was supposed to be Saturn as well, right?
Well, this is it, right? Yeah. Kronos, time, Saturn, Satan, Enlil, right? You have Zeus, Enlil as well. We have Neptune, Poseidon, Enki, you know. So they seem to have like immortalized themselves in our consciousness by making us think that they were gods. And I think it was quite smart on them, because if they had advanced technology, they could almost predict like when certain events would happen, which is what happened in the flood story in the Bible. Now, the real story in there is that Enki saw that there was going to be a cataclysm. We would have a flood, and there was going to be a collision on the planet with another celestial body. And what happened is that they made an oath not to tell the humans that these things were going to happen, because they were trying to kill us out. What happened is that there was a story in the it's told in the Lost Book of Enki, where Enki went to Ziasudra, which was his son, because he had sex with one of the earth ladies, and he told him, and the way he told him through a wall. So Ziasudra was on one side of the wall, and God, Enki at the time, he was on the other side of the wall, and he told him that a cataclysm is coming, there'll be a great flood, build a vessel. And he gave him the dimensions, and he told him the materials to use, and that is exactly the same as the flood story with Noah. So the character Noah comes from that Sumerian story with Ziasudra and Enki to build an ark. So as you see, again, you have to go back to these texts to read them, because the Bible is just a copy of the original information with some tweaks here and there, some stuff taken out, some stuff put in, and this is why we don't know anything, you know?
Man, this was a really fascinating conversation. You can probably hear my baby in the background. I got to get going here pretty quick, but dude, we're just going to have to do this again. We're going to have to turn this into a part 2. I have so many more questions for you. I want to know how like this ties into things like Tartaria. Like, I don't know if you've done any research into that. Man, all this stuff is super fascinating. And then we can talk about serious things too. If we have to talk about the economy or something, you know, that's fun things to talk about too. But yeah, so this was an awesome time, dude. This was fantastic information. Do you want to tell our audience one more time where they can find you and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on Instagram at Adriano_246, or Facebook, my name, Todd Cave. And, send me a message if you have any questions, or while I do talk about these things, I am a fitness trainer. So I help
That's true too.
Yeah, I help spiritually inclined people burn fat and build muscle. And one of the reasons why my students get great results is because I don't just coach their bodies. I help them with their mind, help improve their mindset, teach them about things about spirituality, show them how their thoughts are what causes them to self-sabotage. Their belief in themselves is actually what makes them become winners, you know, by taking action and believing. And then obviously they have the accountability from me to keep them following their routine. And it's fun because I give them like books to read. I introduce them to things like meditation, and the things that we spoke about today. I do share as well with them, because like I look at the body as we are a mind, body, spirit complex, the human being. So you can't just focus on the body only. You have to focus on your mind and the spiritual part, which is why I do things like meditation. I give them meditations to do. I give them books to read so that they can learn about their real, true inner power. Because what I say is that I will help you to get your body fit and get your mind right. And when those two get married and have a baby, you connect to the spirit, which is you, right? And that way now you can increase your consciousness. Because when you start to get your body in shape, you start to become open to receiving information. And the reason for that is because you raise your energy, frequency, vibration. So you're more open to, okay, well, I'll have a look and see, you know, because I don't just tell people, well, believe me. I'll tell you, well, you can read that book, you can read that document, this, that, etc. And when they read them, they start to like, you know, improve themselves, because we're all connected. And I am you, you are me, and together we're one, We're one mind, one body, one spirit, one consciousness. So I have to treat you in a way that I want to be treated. So this is why, you know, we have great fun, and we burn loads of fat, we get shape, and, you know, we live our best lives. And this is what I teach all of my students to do.
Awesome, man. That was awesome. That was powerful stuff. Thank you, Todd.
Sure, man. I'd be happy to come on again and do a part 2, man, because we're just getting started.
Yeah. Awesome, brother. Peace.
Nice one.